little control rack. Links the governor to the pump elements. For the pump to operate correctly, when it's all said and done, this control rack, linking the governor to the pump, has to be completely free. Hopefully it'll stay free enough to return on its own power with all parts installed. Barrels and plungers are so finely produced within microns. If you get any kind of wear on these at all, you'll start losing power first, and then eventually your unit won't even start. Every one of these will get a shim so that they are exactly 60 degrees apart in their firing order. Start with a 145, which is the number that it came apart with on number 1. Good starting point. They have to be matched exactly. Okay, this unit here, we're using new flange bushings. The old ones, rusty. Put an O-ring on that, it's not going to seal. So they are getting replaced. Again, keep these in order. Going to be number 1. The barrel and plunger first, the delivery valve second. Delivery valve gasket. Spring filler piece. Every cylinder has a steel baffle on it for whenever injection is done. The high pressure escapes there after the cylinder's been done pumping, so it doesn't erode through the housing. Gets a steel baffle ring. Special tool again. New snap ring. Again, new seals. In this particular unit here, the top O-ring keeps fuel from escaping to the exterior. 2 bottom O-rings keep the fuel from getting into the engine oil. From here on up is all fuel. There down is engine oil. Grease to keep them from getting cut. Locating pin. Control rack side. For now, I'll just set it in the housing. And on to the rest. Just a note about the baffle ring that I'm telling you about. You want the baffle ring with the holes down. If you flip it upside down, you line your baffle ring holes up with your spill port holes and negate the efficiency of that product. Or the spill from fuel injection will erode right through the side of aluminum. You also don't want to pack between your O-rings with grease. You just want to use enough grease to barely lubricate them. If you put too much grease in there, you stick it in the housing, pressure can build up in that area and seize the barrel and plunger. Not good. The adequate amount of grease, they pop right in without cutting the O-rings. Each one of these barrels have oblong slots on them. That's going to be used to finely tune and balance all 6 cylinders together. So for now, I'm going to try to center my studs in those holes. All very important to keep these barrel and plungers from seizing. Okay, top end complete for now. This is the same control rack out of the pump. 6 notches, 6 control sleeves. Each one of these goes on top of a plunger. So when one plunger is rotated, all 6 of them are rotated the same amount. Okay, visually I can see all 6 of them moving together. Still have a free rack. Plungers have an identifying mark for the direction they go in. Plungers installed. Tappets rollers. Again, lubrication. Locating pin. Cam is not going to go in with the tappets sticking down that far on their plunger return springs. So, special tool. This we can compress the springs with. More special tools to hold them in position with the spring compressed. I have to locate the plunger with the segment. Each one of these, as we put them in, we're going to make sure that rack is free. All 6 plungers in and still free, so we're ready to install the cam. 2 important portions about the cam. One of them is going to be final in play. But another thing we have to worry about is the protrusion of the taper outside the front of the pump. First thing we're going to do is position the rear cam. Done by a shim inside the governor cover. This is going to result in the protrusion. We had a thicker shim, move the cam bearing forward, have more protrusion. Thinner shim, less protrusion. First thing I'm going to do is move this bearing back in its race so that when I tighten the cover to the housing, it will set this bearing the distance that this shim is asking for. Area diesel special tool. All this is doing is moving the bearing back in the housing a little bit. camshaft should turn with no in play, up to 4 thousandths, but closer to nothing. So in play is correct. Now we'll check protrusion. Have a taper on the end of the cam, a taper tool, standard calipers. Measure my distance. Should be 13.5. And I am at 1348, so that is very, very good protrusion. With protrusion set, in place set, we'll remove the tappet tools. Can't spin the cam anymore. Pressure from tappet and springs is on it. The rack should still be free. Still good. Attach our bottom cover. First thing I'm going to install is my shutoff shaft. It's hard to get in there if the weights are installed. I need my shutoff on this side of the pump. So I'm going to have to move my lever to the opposite side. And in play on this shaft is also important. That's my thinner spacer. Has the correct in play, still free. With the governor linkage installed, this will work the control rack from the forward position, which is a running position, to a shut-off position. Next we'll install our weights. The 8.3 we're putting this in, being in a forklift. We're installing an automotive style governor versus an agricultural governor. Agricultural governor has a different style of flyweights. It always has a governor at all ranges of speed. Mid-speed has a governor. This pump is set up, has a governor at idle, a high-speed cutoff. The middle range of this engine is ran with a foot feed for the throttle on the forklift. If it starts getting under load, you give it some more throttle. Load comes off, you let off the throttle. Basically they have the idle springs pack initially. Then the second spring pack is much heavier. So the first portion it runs on the idle springs. High speed it runs under full load springs. It's also set up with a fuel plate. Two examples. Governor action, flyweight action. The faster this governor goes, the higher this rod lifts up and down inside here. As it moves up and down, it will track along the curvature of this fuel plate. So at different speeds, at low speed it'll be down here, allowing the rack to go forward further. The faster the engine goes, mid-range, it can only go that far forward. This fuel plate here is set up for a top end. It will go extremely far. This one has several ramps. This is the one we're going to use. Again, it's all up to the test plan and the governor setup. Built with rubber cushions to isolate the vibration of the camshaft and the tappets away from the weights. Once the unit's calibrated and we set our timing, this extension is going to line up with a timing window. At the beginning of injection on number 1, we will determine the timing this engine will be set at. We will tighten this drive down at that particular point. I have a range with slots on it. That tool installed on the front, I'll center my timing window, tighten the drive and the weights down, and I'll still have a little bit of range of movement for fine-tuning my timing to whatever. Loctite. Flyweights on a dry taper. Okay, we got another very special washer. When I would attach these flyweights, I want them to be on their rubber cushions. If I have too thin of a washer, this set of weights will get locked to the camshaft, and vibration could very easily loosen this nut. Flyweights can come loose, no governor control, bad problem. So after I torque this in, I want to make sure that I still have a rubber cushion on my weights. Weights are installed on the cam. We still have some internal governor to build. You got to rotate this sideways. This rod's going to transfer motion from my flyweights to my governor arm. It's adjustable. It has to be set in relation to the pump. Extend that through the weights in the relaxed position. A go, no-go gauge. I know my adjustment's correct. I'll reclip my pin. We'll finalize the internal governor parts and then we'll proceed to the cover. Assemble the governor cover. Already have new seal installed, new plug in the back. Of course, it's been cleaned up and faced off in the back with everything else to begin with. We're going to install a different throttle shaft that will accompany our throttle lever, our return spring setup. Okay, this is more just internal RQV governor parts. Guide blocks attached to the throttle lever, throttle shaft, using tapered pins. So the first thing I have to do, 2/0 reamer, has the same taper as my pins. So we're going to clean out the pin holes. Starting with the first one. Pre-install the pin. Taper the second one to match. Should be protruding the same, they are. Okay, that's ready for installation. We have 2 shims, which will keep our throttle shaft with the right amount of in play. Check for freedom of movement. No acceptance in play. You can see a little bit of the operation of this. It starts out in the back, ends up coming further forward. Idle position, full load position. Also changes my ratio of flyweight movement to rack movement. Further this sliding block is up in this track, the less relative motion it has. The further down it goes, the more relative motion it has. All qualities of the governor. Different governors have different S plates. Different governors have different fuel plates. Next trick, getting this cover on that assembly. New gasket. Have this pre-assembled. I know from experience, I'm going to start with that down. I have to get this sliding piston inside this track. First portion is relatively easy. Next step, I have to get this cross pin through another portion of the pump. Now there's just some final button ups we're going to do to the governor. Plug, cover, show you about the fuel plate. Mouse to top the governor. The further forward this fuel plate is adjusted, the more fuel it'll put out on the engine. The further back, the less amount of fuel. And again, everything else is controlled with the ramp hitting the ramps on my plate. Okay, we're going to leave this cover off, as we have an adjustment or two inside here that we're going to have to make on the test stand. We have one more assembly we're going to make before we get in on the test stand. Our aneroid setup. It's going to cut fuel delivery back using the same fuel portions inside the governor. Will be dependent on the amount of boost the turbocharger is making at the time. With no turbo boost, fuel will be slid backwards. The more turbo boost we get, we'll get full fuel, fuel adjusted fuel. Our build is complete. Next step will be moving to the test room and calibration.